you go back to the past, those were almost silos. The teams
Yeah.
didn't really talk or interact with each other. For a lot of duplication in their efforts, they got on and they did what they needed to do. The world isn't like that anymore, especially when we start using a lot of open source technologies and things that are in the marketplace. How do we, instead of having to run a central solution and force people to use it, people now want to adopt things off of things like the CNCF landscape or out of FINOS projects. How do we enable them to do that? How do we get them to start contributing to these things? We've evolved our approach as well.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Grizz Griswold of FINOS. Hope you're doing well. Today, I have two new friends in the room. I have Chris Plank from NatWest Bank and Derik Evangelisa from Syntasso. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are you?
You're great, thanks. Hello from Scotland. How are you doing?
Wonderful. And Derik, where are you from?
I'm based in London.
Okay. Very good. Good. Thank you, folks, for joining. And what we're actually doing here today is we're following up from Open Source and Finance Forum London that was a couple of weeks ago. And both Chris and Derik presented a talk called Unlocking Innovation, How NatWest Bank Uses Cloud Native Tools to Deliver Platform as a Product. And so we want to revisit some of that today. I want to talk about the two of you individually. I'm going to have you introduce yourselves, but I want to talk about you. I want to talk a little bit about your talk and some places where that talk went, what you could add on to it. And I think too, Chris, you said beforehand, before we started, like there are some interesting things that have actually happened in the world as in the past 24 hours that we can kind of add to all of this with some things going down. But we'll come back to that. Chris, NatWest, tell us about yourself.
Hello, yeah. So I'm Chris Plank. I'm an enterprise architect. I've worked in IT now for about 30 years, maybe a little bit longer, getting a little bit older. My current role, I'm an enterprise architect. I'm a product owner, joint product owner. I'm really an evangelist for platform engineering. I'm leading a piece of work on platform as a product. So it's a relatively new space for a lot of financial services organizations, where we're really looking to try and take some of this product-oriented thinking and do a bit of an evolution on our journey, our cloud journey, our automation journey. Been on that journey now, the current kind of version of that, I think since 2017, of public cloud adoption, private cloud, infrastructure as code, DevOps. Now we're kind of getting into the GitOps era, the internal developer portals, the backstage side of things that you'll hear people talking about. How do we bring that into financial services? How do we use that to make our internal teams more productive so that they can bring things to market, really innovative things to market quicker for our customers? That's what I'm all about.
Cool. And I want to, let's not put a pin because pin stops something. I do want to come back to about platform engineering and GitOps too, because sometimes it's good to kind of have it be a little bit definitional. In fact, let's do that. Derik will come back, I promise. But can you define what you mean as far as platform engineering? Because we have a wide range of people that listen to this, and some of them are, depending on if they're front end, back end, all the above.
Absolutely. Especially in financial services, right? With our size, I think we're different from a lot of organizations. We've got a lot of separation of duties. We've got a lot of different divisions, departments. We have to do things in a certain way for regulation. So we have central teams. Some companies don't like central teams, but sometimes you need that. I'm part of cloud platforms. So we look after cloud. We've got a number of different platform teams inside there. But it's our kind of GCP team, our AWS team, our Azure team, our OpenShift team. We have some different technology teams that look after different products. And that's how we've always worked, right? And what we're trying to do now, and Derik will talk a lot more about kind of Kratix later, what we're really trying to do in this space is start thinking about how we move more to like an inner sourcing model, more like you would use in public cloud, where we recognize we can't solve all the problems ourselves anymore. And instead of all the great empowerment that we've done with the business over the last, let's just talk about the last 7 years with public cloud, where we've given them tools that we centrally run, but we've given them the capability and the training and everything else, all that support we could give them to go off and do engineering of public cloud solutions themselves and be more productive. And we've done all of that, and it's been great, really successful, highly highly successful in the market. We've got a massive percentage of our customers using our digital platforms now. How do we take all of that and take it to the next level? How do we get them to start contributing to something central in an inner source and open source type approach?
Yeah.
And how do we get a lot of that consistency and the guide rails and a lot of the human-centric stuff that we had to put in the past? People would talk about guide rails, bake that into products, then make those products more available for them and start funding products instead of funding teams, and just thinking of things differently based on things like the CNCF platform working group, platform maturity model. That's a really good thing to use to start kind of trying to drive some of these ideas and best practices.
Cool. Thank you for that. And we obviously will come back to that in our discussion. Derik Evangelista. Did I get that right? I just so you know, and I told you guys, I will butcher people's names accidentally every single podcast. So I'm hoping I didn't mess it up.
No, it's all right. That's the right way. So it is all right if you mess it up, and that's how I would pronounce it.
Great. Can I get the AI effect? Just turn me into Sean Connery or Jerry Butler or anything else, right?
Yes. Yeah. We will put that in post. How about that? So, Derik, you work with Syntasso. What do you do at Syntasso, but also tell us about yourself and kind of how you got here?
Yeah. So I'm Derik. I'm a principal engineer at Syntasso, and basically I'm building Kratix, which is the product that got highlighted in the talk that we had. So at Syntasso, we build this tool called Kratix. Kratix is a framework for building platforms on top of Kubernetes. And the story comes as like the founders realized that there is a lot of people building platform tooling for developers, focusing on people that want to consume it, which is great. But that usually is a big headache on the people that actually need to manage that and run it. Because organizations like NatWest, they need their own set of rules, their own set of compliance, their own set of steps. There's own set of things that need to happen to provide anything as a service. So when you get a product off the shelf, you kind of have to add your own things on top of it. So Kratix tries to solve that problem. How can we allow organizations to provide services on demand while at the same time providing all of the customization hooks that they need to actually make that happen without being like very opinionated about stuff, being very flexible about it? Because, for example, they have many teams building things with different technologies. Some people like Terraform, some people like Crossplane, some people like bare metal. How can we enable all of them to provide their service the way that they like, the way that they want, the way they already have on demand on top of Kubernetes? And I think that's the main goal of Kratix.
Gotcha. And Kratix is an open source platform as well?
Yeah, it's an open source tool. It's an open source framework for building platforms. So when you download Kratix and install in your cluster, you don't quite get a platform. You get the tools you need to build one.
Gotcha.
We do have a marketplace of pre-built promises. Promises are a definition of something as a service. So you can quick start yourself and go for it. But yeah, it's Apache 2 open source. All the source code is available on GitHub.
Okay. And as a platform engineering framework, I mean, so Chris just gave his definition of platform engineering. I'm not going to say, do you disagree with him? This isn't point counterpoint, but can you kind of give your definition of platform engineering so we've got a basis that we're working with both of you?
Yeah, I think the story we tell at Syntasso is a little bit about the evolution of the DevOps. Back at a time, you had the developers building something, throwing at what would call the infrastructure team that would try to run it, and then would say that back and forth of, I compiled it on my machine, it runs perfectly fine. And then they were like, it doesn't work in production because environments are different, everything is different. And then they had that back and forth. That got evolved into the DevOps, which is like, okay, let's bring those operations people back into the teams. Let's bring that is expertise within the team so we can build with operations in mind, not like as an afterthought. So like, okay, I built all my app. Now someone else needs to figure out how to run, but we bring that expertise into the team. And that works really well, but economy of scales, right? If you have many teams in your organization, if you have an organization with thousands of developers, if you have thousands of developers trying to learn the same sets of tools and trying to figure out how to deploy the same set of applications, how do you extract that and put in a team that is actually providing that to those other teams? And I think that's the platform engineering team, right? That's the team that is like, okay, what is common across my organization? How can I provide that for my developer teams, but really thinking about how can I build a product on top of it. I think that's the main difference than just like, here's a set of scripts that you go run and you're still on yourself. You're still good luck on your own. It's like, how can we take that product mindset and build a product while when our consumers are maybe the internal teams, maybe even the consumers, the final end consumers. So I think that's what I would put platform engineering as, an evolution of DevOps that is there to provide the services that the teams need to move faster, right? In a more economic way for the organization, if that makes sense.
Cool. And it does. And so, Chris, you have a lot of developers there. We won't say how many, but it's a lot. And just like Derik was saying, that, NatWest has been on a journey for building different types of platforms, obviously. And so can either from your talk or just and what you do daily, can you talk about a little bit of that journey? Because it's building, I think it's building on top of your definitions of what platform engineering is.
Yeah, so we've got thousands of developers, right? You think about the size of our organization, we've got 62,000 people worldwide. Let's just take a very rough percentage of the company and say maybe a third of those, right, are working in the IT space doing development. And there's a push to have more and more people do engineering. Engineer, protect, operate is one of our mantras for the division that I work in, right? And that encompasses everything that we do. We want to do things better, faster, simpler, cheaper. We want to get things out to market more quickly. We want to bake those guide rails in. I talked earlier about all these different teams that we had. You go back to the past, those were almost silos. The teams didn't really talk or interact with each other. A lot of duplication in their efforts. They got on and they did what they needed to do. The world isn't like that anymore, especially when we start using a lot of open source technologies and things that are in the marketplace. How do we, instead of having to run a central solution and force people to use it, people now want to adopt things off of things like the CNCF landscape or out of FINOS projects. How do we enable them to do that? How do we get them to start contributing to these things? We've evolved our approach as well. James talked a lot about it down at the conference, James McLeod. He's done an awful lot since he came in, and Ted Newman's done an awful lot with what he's done. He's my ultimate boss. Thinking about how we embrace open source first. How can we start with some open source projects rather than going straight to commercial software? How far can we get with that open source software before we make a decision? Are we going to contribute to that project and get the support that way, where we're active part of that community, or are we going to go and buy a commercial version of it because it's got additional features, right? So all these things are coming into the mixing pot with the evolution of DevOps, with the way the teams need to change to doing kind of inner sourcing contribution and stuff, and really coming up with a new model of how all those developers can quickly contribute, but also quickly reuse as well. I mean, one of our aims is, you think about these internal developer portals. One of the aims is that instead of developers taking, 40, 50, 60 days, you think about how long it takes you to get your feet in when you join a new organization. It takes you a while to learn everything, right? Who are the people that you talk to? Where's the Confluence pages? What processes you've got to go through? It takes a long time, right? And let's just say that was 40 days. Can we get them being productive on day one? And maybe we'll touch on it later, right? But we want to make sure that's safe, that the changes that they promote, maybe to production, are done in a very safe way, still in the guide rails, still adhering to all the compliance rules and everything that we've got to do. So it's a really evolving area. It's a brilliant area. It's just an evolution of what we've all done before, trying to take it to the next level. And I think Kratix is really helping us with that, because it gives us a framework to operate in, whereas maybe before, a lot of us were kind of making some of that up ourselves.
No, and kind of funny that both of you that I'm in marketing and not in engineering, and I don't code as much as I used to, but parallel to what you guys are doing, we're doing the exact same thing with figuring out what our guide rails are with how we do things in marketing. How do we get from point A to point Z, sorry, my bad. and so that's a constant problem, no matter what area of a business that you're in, how to not be siloed, but still how to kind of protect your space so that you can engineer, protect, and manage. Is that what you said earlier? Operate. And because otherwise you're going to stall. And so having a framework, having something that you can build on top of to get people up and like, we wish that we could onboard as fast as we need to, because when we bring somebody in, within a foundation like this, that is, all of our projects are so horizontal across the bank from DevOps to front end and everything in between. Like it's
a massive
yeah.
challenge.
Mhm.
It's especially getting the consistency as well, right? That's one of the things. When we started, we walked in our customers' shoes, and we went through kind of the processes that they've got to go through, and we saw how long it takes them to get something done. And so we've got an initiative where our leadership have decided we're going to make that better, and we're going to significantly cut the time down. We've got some massive targets, and I'll talk about that in some of my talks, where we really are going really aggressive at how we help them. And one of the easiest ways of helping them is taking back some of that kind of flexibility that we gave them, and give them some tools. And our ultimate aim is, if we come up with some really useful products, I use the iPhone as an example. If you give them a compelling product, they're going to use it. And you really want that minimal loved product, right? What's that simple thing that you can start with, and you can start building that relationship with them? That's what Apple did, right? And it's a really good example of copy. When we were in Paris, we had AWS being used as an example with their early services as well. And they built it up over time, and it's now loved by everyone, right? So we're trying to kind of change it as a bank and do that sort of technology stuff for our own internal teams to operate in that way and consume in that way, which ultimately helps them help our customers. And that, at the end of the day, that's what's it all about, right? If I can help my teams to be more productive, then they're helping our customers quicker and better. And that's what it's all about for us.
And how is Kratix, like, okay, I get the framework idea, but how specifically do you use it, Derik or Chris, it doesn't matter, in order to build those guide rails?
Right. I mean, Derik can delve right into the technicals after me and describe it far more eloquent than I can. But we've got this concept of building blocks, which we call promises. And think of those like little components. I tell people to think of them like Lego. So we have one team contributes its Lego, we have another team contribute its Lego, and then we've got this wider thing that we call a compound promise, which is a grouping of them together, which is really a product with an opinion. The opinion is the product, and the opinion is the glue, binds all those components together in a certain way. So if you think of those like Lego building blocks, you've decided to build the Death Star. Let's build a Death Star, right? Different
6,000 pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? Really, really complicated. Now, is one team going to manage to do that all themselves? No. But if you distribute it to these different teams, they can quickly create those, maintain those. You can pull them together. But once you've got those in a catalog, you can actually start creating really innovative, different products using the same things you've already got. And if you equate that back to how we all used to operate, where we created a platform, the platform was one rigid thing. It operated in one way. Now we're creating these really kind of small building blocks that we can reconstitute, turn them into different things, and say, you want a Death Star? But actually, here's also a TIE fighter, right? We're in a Star Wars kind of era at the moment. I was watching
Totally fine.
That's probably why, right? we're trying to just reuse a lot of these components. And I think that's what this framework gives us, right? It's got a consistent way of operating and orchestrating in a GitOps model. We can kind of devolve that down to the individual platform teams. We can create higher level abstractions that are ultimately just APIs. So when our product teams come along in Backstage, they can use Backstage to select those tiles and have those products, but they can also contribute to creating new tiles, new groupings of those components that do something more innovative for them. And the more things we get in that catalog, the more opportunity that gives them to do real innovative things without actually having to do a lot of the engineering. They can just reconsume things other people have engineered. And that's really, I mean, we talked about it earlier, that's where I would like to take the Kratix stuff in FINOS. I would love to see a FINOS project that's almost like a Kratix marketplace for financial services components, right? That maybe different banks have all contributed to. And we've started to consume an awful lot of FINOS projects. We've talked Git proxy, common cloud controls, we're kind of involved in that. Calm, I've been looking at Calm recently and actually seeing how we can bring that into what we're doing with Kratix. So are we able to contribute some stuff back that maybe other people can use that's also mixing some of this open source stuff together. That's what we're now interested in.
And Derik, you talked about the technical aspect of how Kratix does that in the talk that you and Chris did. Do you want to go? I would say keep in mind that we do have a crowd of developers that listen and watch this, and we do have a crowd of more on the, I would say, the business side. So however deep you want to go into, go right ahead.
So Kratix compiles a same. No, just kidding. It's basically what Chris mentioned about a promise. The promise is a document. It's basically like everything in Kubernetes, a fat text file that contains some definitions, and within that definition you have 4 main things, right? You have an API, which is basically the definition of what can the user configure, right? That API is your API, so it's the team that is building that promise API. So they can go there and they can declare and say, well, I'm providing Postgres as a service, as an example. I want my user to be able to configure what are the predetermined databases that I need to create, right? Like within that Postgres instance, what's the size? Should it be either a number or should it be small, medium, and large, right? Like it's up to you. It's your API. And you can define all of those things. In response to that API, you also need to create a set of steps, basically. It's like when a request comes in, run this series of pipelines, basically.
Okay.
And those series of pipelines is what actually going to transform that request into reality. It's like actually going and creating those resources, right? And then the interesting thing about Kratix is that it's an open framework. So you can write those steps in whatever language, whatever technology you want. Yep. So that's what we call, that enables what we call the multiplayer mode. So if you have multiple teams providing their service or wanting to provide their thing as a service, you cannot be closed, right? You cannot say, well, you must write everything in Python, and you must use Terraform, you must use this or that. Otherwise, people are like, well, I don't want to rewrite my entire stack just because there is this other team asking me to provide this as a service via this platform, right? Just going to keep my own thing over here, and then it doesn't make the life of the developer easier. I think that's what Kratix also have in mind is, how can we enable all of those teams to provide their services via the platform so the life of the developer is easier? Although we focus on the platform engineering team, the goal is that the life of the developer is easier. Right? They have that experience, which is a little bit of what Chris is talking about, the building blocks, is the ability of Kratix to create those golden paths. I think golden path is a concept that is being on the rise. I think it's Spotify, if I'm not mistaken, was published an article about golden paths, which is like the well-trodden path. If all you want is your app running with a database with maybe some cache, maybe a CDN, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You go to this route and it will take you there. Yes, you have some specialized teams that need more control. Maybe they're running like a highly available with millions and millions of users app that need to tweak in a certain way. But the majority of your customers will probably just want to run their app, attach database, and see a website that has their code running. Right. So Kratix allows you to build those two experiences by building those lower level components, which is like, here's my Postgres, and there are many fields or many configuration options. And it also allows the platform engineering team to use that definition and say, well, I will build a app offering that will actually pre-configure the Postgres with a few fields, with a few configuration options. So the user doesn't have that worry. All they need to tell me is like, what is the size? And then I'll do all of the hard work for them.
Cool.
So yeah, it's basically that. And there is a few other components in the promise as well, but it's basically through the promise that the platform engineering team will declare, this is what I'm providing, and the developer consumes it. And then that can go as high level or as low level as the needs for the team.
It's kind of interesting the way that you described the technical aspect. And I think when you got into step 2, it started to remind me, I just did an interview with Philibase, who's the CEO of Regnosis, and they just contributed Rune to FINOS as part of the CDM, the common domain model. And we're talking RegTech there, but it started out as a project called Rosetta. And then when Leo started to tell me exactly like, basically like, we want to make sure that in the common domain model that if you're trying to do this and you use Scala versus you use this language versus this language, that it really doesn't matter. Like it's taking everything in, it's compiling everything, and then it's making it so that I think for them it's not executable, but it makes it so that it makes sense to bring your build your executable basically on whatever language that you need to, because the intents have already been worked on through the language or through the Rune language. I started to feel like there was a little bit of Rosetta Stone type going on with,
Well, there is.
what you're, yeah.
Yes, it's promise theory. A lot of this is all based on promise theory, and there's massive works on that. I mean, the guys behind Syntasso are pretty clever, right? From their pivotal days, they've been building platforms.
Oh yeah, that's right.
A long time, yeah. When we think about Chris and Colin and Paula and the stuff that they've done, and the wider team, and Abby and the CNCF, we've got a lot of leadership out of them doing a lot of that thinking about things like those models and the platform maturity model as well. This whole concept of Kratix is a wrapper, really. It's a pipeline wrapper for us. The teams can go off and use whatever technology they're comfortable with. And it doesn't matter anymore. We're not getting into these wars, the Canon Nikon war, right? Or the Terraform cross-plane war, right? We're not being prescriptive, right? Descriptive. We're giving them tooling, guidelines that let them do something with whatever they're comfortable with. It contributes to a wider picture. That's pretty powerful from where we've been in the past. Right? You must learn Terraform. You must use Ansible for this. You must use Python. Yeah, but I'm a PowerShell guy, so how am I going to do that? Now, kind of allowing people to contribute in whichever language they are most comfortable with. Promise is the key, because we have a way of exposing those APIs in a consistent format, and that's the highest level of abstraction that we use in the department. And then we can cobble these things together really quickly.
I think because there's two I don't care that happens there, right? The first is like the framework. Kratix doesn't care about the language that the platform engineering team wants to use. But there's also the developer doesn't care. Like if the platform engineering team is using whatever, all they want is like, give me an API endpoint that I can hit and I can get what I need. Right. What happens with that is like, it's not I don't really care. So that's an interesting, just like a side point.
Yeah.
Good point. I mean, abstract it away and deliver like a managed Kubernetes cluster in 1 hour, right? The developer doesn't care what it takes to stand that up. All they want to know is, how do I deploy my app and how do I test it? How do I access it? That's it.
And so that kind of fits what you're saying as far as like, if we could get a developer on day one to be, okay, they need to find the copy machine, the coffee machine, the tea machine, and the bathroom. But past that, onboarding done, you could actually have, you could have them be useful pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. They don't need to know any of those people. They don't need to even know AWS or Terraform or whatever choices the organization's made behind the scenes, right? You don't need to learn any of that. They literally can work in their domain and say, I'm a Java developer. Oh, I want one of those. It tells me how to deploy my app. I put my app in here. I run it through this pipeline step and it'll get deployed. Great. Job done. Nirvana, right?
It's right behind you, Chris. Yeah, and obviously for the listeners, for the viewers, in the show notes, what we'll make sure we do is we're going to also have a link to Chris and Derik's OSFF talk, because I know that, Chris, you tell a little bit of this story beforehand, but I know, Derik, too, you go into the actual, I was going to say sausage production, it seemed like, of how things work too. So we do have a basis of, if you want to dive deeper into this, we can do that. We wanted to talk about, and I don't know how to bring this through, but tell me how the outages today for CrowdStrike and which public cloud, there are outages today. You brought it up. I heard about it from my wife.
Friday the 19th, we're recording this, right? An outage overnight, I believe, of US Central Region, so that's Azure. All 3 availability zones, sounds like they were down. And then we had CrowdStrike. Something was pushed to production somewhere. Why you did a deployment on Friday, I really don't know. But someone did a Friday deployment, right? We've all learned that lesson before.
And somebody's working Saturday and Sunday. Go ahead.
And there's blue screens of death everywhere, If you're flying today, good luck to you. All the screens are down.
Yeah, my wife's in healthcare. My wife's in healthcare, and it affected there too. Yep.
Yeah, and that to me shows, and a lot of people have been talking about this, lack of testing, right? How could this get out there and it hasn't been tested? Lack of following the standard processes. So there should be a process in, the things are tested against a lab. Maybe they should be ripple fed around different parts of the world at different times of the day, not all on the same day. There's a lot of things there. And that kind of relates back to what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to take all that knowledge, all that experience that people have got from traditional change management. How do we bake that into products so that in the framework, when we're releasing products, we've done it and we've been through development and test and staging. We're at testing that all this testing has actually been done. And that we can programmatically start looking at those things to say, give me that evidence, give me that example, show me that these are patched, show me that it's been through all the automated testing, show me this has been successfully deployed 100 zillion times before it's actually released to production. Whatever those traditional change controls are, how do we do that? I got asked the question in the talk, and Derik said we're kind of limited in what we can say. And I was a bit flippant in the answer because it was right at the end and we run out of time. But I think it answered it along the lines of the change management, the existing processes, that's old school processes. There's a place for those. And in the modern era, the place is not to have completing spreadsheets and cabs and doing all that sort of stuff. It's actually bake it in and do a lot of that via automation. We still use ServiceNow. We're still raising change tickets and approvals, but it's getting done in an automated fashion by the automation. We're still providing the evidence, but it's not a human creating a spreadsheet. It's the inside the actual product coming out of all the testing that you've done, putting that stuff back in via Git so that it's actually there and available for, downstream systems to consume, pipeline steps, right? And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. I think, well, I don't want to speculate on what might happen at CrowdStrike, right? But we're all kind of looking at it and going, how could this get out in the wild? Why is it not being tested on some machines? What it went out? Because surely the first machine you push this update onto would have blue screened of death, right? That's what everyone's saying. It's not me, and this is my view, by the way. I should say Chris Plank, not Chris Plank, NatWest. Yeah, just want to get that legal disclaimer in there. Right?
Of course,
everyone's talking about that today, right?
Yeah.
It is the number one topic, and we've got to make sure that we bake those guide rails in, and that any of those lessons we've learned in the past, we get those put in the products, and we start doing that in a consistent way, because those are kind of human-centric guide rails that we're all doing. And how do we get those human-centric guide rails into the automation?
Derik, how can people contribute to Kratix? How can people get involved besides obviously purchasing Syntasso services? But as far as the project itself, and I want to make again disclaimer here, just like this is not a FINOS project, and so it's something that is very interesting to see how you folks at Syntasso are building it, what's being built on top of it. And I think too, talking with your COO, Paula, a few weeks back, she was saying that you guys didn't even expect to be in financial services when you first started this. This was not the industry that you're like, that's it, that's where we're going. So interesting how like, not only did you two do a presentation together because you're obviously working with each other, but Syntasso joined FINOS a couple of months back. And that was never the intent of any of this. So anyway, that was a bunch. Go ahead and answer whatever you want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To contribute or to get involved, we really just go to GitHub. We have a repository there where you can check the code. To go see code is Apache 2. We're not in any foundation right now because it's still early days. We're still thinking about like what's the best way to move forward with that. But code is Apache 2, is open source. Anyone can take a look at the source code, contribute, open issues, give us feedback, will be greatly appreciated. We also have a Slack community, so you can join, say hello. We can chat about it. Any questions as well. It's a little bit more synchronous communication, although it's an async too. You can get some messages there. That'll be great. And finally, if you go to syntasso.io, there is contact us. You can put something in the calendar as well if you're just want to chat or see a demo or have a problem and wondering if Kratix can help you solve it. We're more than happy to sit down and have that conversation. Yeah, you spot on. Financial institutions were not like the target that we went for, but in retrospect, is really Kratix tries to solve the problems that a lot of financial organizations have, right? They have highly regulated environments. If my bank goes out, I will notice. It's like everyone will notice, right? If you go to the supermarket and things like don't work, things may be bad.
You had no problems today.
Just another disclaimer.
Disclaimer, sorry, yeah.
Exactly. And highly regulated, very aware of change. It's like things that, given that the impact on everyone's life can be very high, people can just YOLO and do whatever they want because that can cause big issues. So yeah, Kratix fits right in. But at the same time, organizations, financial organizations, and any other organization wants to go faster, right? There's competition, the market it's a lot of talking about financial institutions. There are a lot of options out there. So how can we continue to innovate? I think that's the point of the talk, right? How can we innovate and go fast and move forward in an environment where you can just do what, Facebook does, right? If Facebook's maybe not right now, but because to be fair, it's quite highly used across the globe for many different things. But like if a random website goes down, the impact is very low. People won't care too much. So you can move fast and break things. You cannot actually move that fast and break that many things in some sort of organizations, but you still want to move fast. So how can you provide those guardrails that Chris said, those golden paths that enable you to go faster with security and safety and knowing that, all right, this is the well-trotted path. We are confident that we can push this forward because we tested it, we tried it. It's the only way that you can use this service. Yeah,
that's the key, right? There's no, if it says you need to test this thing before it's released, there's no way of getting around that, right? It's baked in. It has to happen. And I think that's the key. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lessons learned over the next month or so that comes out of all these different postmortems, whether it's CrowdStrike or even whether it's some of the customers, right? About what they're doing and how they've enabled automatic updates rather than testing it first before updating. So many things that were learned in the past that you seem to have kind of just impacted some people today. It'll be interesting to see what lessons they learn out of those, right? And how they apply that to going forward. And we all make mistakes. We do, right? And it's about how you deal with those mistakes and how you move forward so that it doesn't happen again.
Yep. That's truth to that one, for sure. Chris, Derik, thank you so much. It's taken us a couple of weeks to actually get this together, mainly because of me. But I appreciate this. I would tell you the truth that I don't know that I was a little bit scared to do this podcast, but because I kept struggling too with how do I understand the information that you guys presented, coming from, mine's like a half tech, half business background. But I think what I got out of this today was, like, first of all, both of you were very good explaining like the value that this brings to a business. And it doesn't have to be financial services, but the value within the processes that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And again, that's something, like I said, in our marketing organization, obviously we have to deal with the same type of things, but it transcends just what you guys are doing, what we're doing. It's more of the, I was going to say the human business condition or something like that. And I appreciate you presenting it in a way that is very, I think, consumable to technical people and non-technical people as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Really enjoyed this today.
Cool. Me too. Maybe we can do this again in 6 months and another conference down the road. Sounds good.
We'll do a whiskey next time.
Thank you. All right. So with that as a closing, I'm going to say good day, good night, wherever you are, and thank you.